But I'm no revisionist because I remember when they did it, and I would come home, and my kids were listening to it, and I would park my car in the driveway, right? And the music was booming out on the sidewalk, and I'd come in and said, come on, people, like I can hear that music all on the sidewalk. People would pass my house looking up, looking like this, right? And I said, and they said, oh, mom. I said, cut it down. They'd look at me and cut it down. And then they would start, I said, anyway, you can't even understand what they're saying. And they looked at me, and I said, you can't. And then one of them said very gently, well, Mom, you're from New York. You talk so fast. We had trouble understanding you. And I looked and realized that was the case. But that was a generational thing I was talking about then. And I stopped myself, I who prided myself in, non-generational things. And they said, just sit down and listen. And they sat me down, because every Sunday we would have a session, we take the phone off the hook. And from 11 to 1 o'clock, we had a session. I had an hour to do something. They had an hour to do something. And what we would do is that sometimes I would say to them, you got to read, Richard Wright, Black Boy, and we're going to talk about this, whatever. But once they had some friends over, and I was feeding them, all their little partners, right? And I was feeding them, and one of them started talking about some girl who was easy. And I heard it, I said, well, maybe I shouldn't say anything. Maybe I should ignore it. My children always say, Mom, you embarrass us with our friends, right? And so I kind of put the food out, and I said, well, if that girl is that easy, if she's that, fast, if she does it with all the boys, I said, doesn't that make the boys easy too? And they said, oh, no, Miss Sanchez, you don't understand. I said, oh, no, I do understand, right? I said, our Sunday session would be on sex. They looked at me. So I said, for 1 hour, I'll talk about sex, and for 1 hour, you talk about sex. And they would look. And then I started off with that book. It was a book that when they were little called Peter and Caroline. No, anyone ever saw that book. And it's a couple, and they're naked in there, whatever. And they talk about the parts of the body, whatever. I had read it to them, whatever. I said, remember the time when I had jumped out of the shower, my door was closed, and you should knock on the door, and they were fighting, and they both burst into the door, and I was standing there drying myself off naked, and they started to look. I said, yes, that's right, Mommy has breasts, I used to feed you here, and I said, I have a vagina also too, and they looked at me and I said, you have a penis, right, and now get out of here, and they got out, right, but the point was that, you didn't make it all secretive stuff, whatever, etc. And so I started off that book. They said, oh, yeah, we remember that book, whatever, et cetera. We talked about the parts. Because I figured you would tell them they had a penis instead of like ding-a-ling or a twinkling or something. You'll have to change it over the years, you know what I mean? If you just tell them the first time, it's a penis, whatever. You never have to change it. I mean, it just stays there. And so we start talking about that. And then I also read them, because they had just hit teenage years, sections for, I should never forget it, Lady Chatterley's Lover, a certain section in there, whatever. And then they began to talk about, and the misinformation they had about sex was like unbelievable. I mean, misinformation. I mean, like stuff in the streets, kind of stuff. And I remember that I listened with my mouth wide open, the kind of stuff that they talk about, whatever. And so we had this conversation. Well, we did that with a lot of things, like music. The first thing that I would do, my children would come down on Sunday, and Saturday was the time that we would either go out to movies and, and stuff and play games and like the way that my father had raised us, whatever. And we stay up late, and then get up. And they come downstairs either to Beethoven or Coltrane or to Miles, whatever, or to Bach. And they say, oh, God, what are we doing now? I mean, they really like, and we do the thing during the day, and they had to listen to this music. And, to such a point, when they came home from college, they came in once, I never forget it, with a Coltrane, and said, Mom, you have to listen to this. And I wanted to say, oh, yeah, right. But they finally had stumbled on jazz, which they all will stumble on any kind of classical stuff eventually at some point, all kinds of music at some point. So I did all mine, whatever, and included little Stevie, whatever. And then they started off with theirs, right? And they started off with Coltrane and that beautiful lyrical thing that he does with that singer. The very thought of you makes my heart sing.
Yeah.
John Hartman. Who said Hartman? Thank you, thank you. Yeah. And they stuck, because I used to play that when they were coming downstairs. And then they went to rap. And there we were again at that point, you know. And they made me listen. They said, no, 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 no. Say it. I'm going to play it again. You listen. And so therefore, I am grateful. I cannot accept, you know, and say, I all of a sudden understood rap. My children made me. They said, what you've done is that you tune it out, you know. And I tune my ears again to the fast way that we talk, you know. Because, you know, we're New Yorkers. We talk fast. I read differently in New York than I do any other place in the world. Because, you know, when I come to New York, it's a whole nother different, you know, cadence, whatever, you know, and I hear, and it's a whole different audience. And you say things in New York that you say other places and nobody understands. But you say it in New York and the crowd goes, hey, yeah, right, you know, because it is that different kind of, and I'm not being, chauvinistic. That is, I'm not being chauvinistic about this, but it really does happen on a stage, right? Period. Because we first went out for the Black Studies, Barack and I did a reading together, and we did this thing like, and he went and laughed, you know, and I went, and we said, well, we're some bad people. You know, we knew we were bad, and we looked, and people clapped, and then someone said, Professor Sanchez, could you and Mr. Could you do that again? Because you went so fast, we didn't quite understand what you did. And it hit me that what we had done is that we had taken the Eastern culture to the West Coast. And when I used to walk across campus, I was walking like this. They were walking like, where are you rushing to, Professor Sanchez, you know? But I took that, and it's true. And the same thing, I would be speaking in my class, and they would say, could you slow down just a little bit? And I had to adjust. And over the years, I learned how to adjust when I went to different cities, you know, because you came in with that, like, everybody got to understand this. And what has helped us as what I call Eastern poets has been rap, because rap is fast. And not your ears, the younger people's ears are tuned to a fast cadence, whatever, et cetera. You know what I mean? If you're slow, people say, what they doing? You know, right. And so rap has really helped a great deal with people understanding this. So this is a talk shop about poetry.